Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Before we get started in today's video, I want to thank you all. 4 weeks in, I'm blown away by the number of views, subscribers, comments, and great feedback we've gotten so far. So I want to thank you all. Secondly, today's video is very cool. I decided when I was going to start doing social media work again, that one of the things I wanted to work on was game changers, both for the golf industry and some others. Today is one of my dear friends, Doug Hardman, who really started, in my opinion, the putter evolution and how certain brands have exploded over the last 20 years. You'll be excited to hear his story. This is one of 3 parts. Thank you for Doug. He actually let me record for over 3 hours. You won't have to see all 3 hours, but I think this is some great content, some great information. But certainly we welcome any comments and feedback. But again, enjoy. This is part 1 of 3 parts. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how we met, and I'll get into my side of it, and you can certainly get into yours.
Yeah.
So years ago, there was this little website. I don't even know if it was a website. It was a Yahoo email collection service called Real Cameron Fans.
It was a listserv is what they were called back then, where you would sign up an email, and then anytime anybody replied, everybody that was on that list got that same email.
Right.
Yeah.
So you started golfing when?
So it was 2000 now I grew up around golf. So my grandfather retired at 62, right on his birthday, because back then that's what you did in the 80s.
Lucky man.
Yeah, you're right. He retired. He'd saved well, and he golfed 5-7 days a week. Retired, and he always had golf on TV, always that, and it was boring to me. Like when you're a 10-year-old kid, like the last thing you want to do is sit there and watch golf. I wanted to be out skateboarding or whatever. So I grew up around it, and my dad had started golfing again right around 2000. I grew up sailing and boating. So, the joke is you can, there's boating, golf, or a job. Pick 2.
Can't have both.
You can't have all 3.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
So most of my summers growing up were sailing and on the water. And then my dad would go out golfing with my grandpa every once in a while. Right around 2004, I bought the company that I was working for at the time. And my dad said, come down, I got something for you. Okay, fine. So my dad had been an entrepreneur. My grandfather had been an entrepreneur. And so I go down to his house in Silver Lake, and he gives me a bag of golf clubs. And I'm like, why do I need golf clubs? And he goes, business gets done on golf courses. So you need to learn how to golf. I'm like, well, are you going to show me? He's like, I want you to go take lessons. You don't learn from me. I'm not a great golfer.
So this is 2000?
This is 2005.
Wow. Okay.
So but what was interesting was he's like, now this putter was really expensive, but I lost the head cover. So go find a head cover for it. And it was a Scotty Cameron Catalina.
Okay.
And so he put a sock on it or something like that. He didn't want it knocking into the other stuff. It had already started to rust a little bit, as the gun blues from that line did. And so I went, and like a couple of days later, I was putzing on the computer, and I'm like, oh, I got to buy a head cover for that. So I went on eBay, and I just typed in Scotty Cameron head cover, because I thought it's a head cover. Like what could happen? And then, and all these different ones. And I'm like, which one am I supposed to buy? I didn't know, like, what one did it come with? What's this one? This one's purple. This one's yellow. This one's orange. This one's got smiley faces on it. Like, which one? So I call my dad and say, what did the head cover look like? And he goes, it was black, and it just had Titleist in script on it. Okay, fine. So then I narrow it down more, and then there's different versions of that. And this one is $500, and this one's only $90. And $90 for a head cover? That sounds stupid. So I called him back again. I'm like, are these $90 for the head cover? And he goes, well, some of them He goes, I've heard people like collect these now. So back to Google, Scotty Cameron collecting, and found real Cameron fans. And so I signed up for that. That was Bill Vogney was the guy that ran that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I signed up for that, and all day long I'm getting emails, like literally all day long.
Yep.
And I'd signed up with, stupidly, my work email, and it was getting blown up. You would get like 200 or 300 emails a day on this thing.
Do you remember, not to interrupt you, do you remember, so same time frame as you, but I remember the names to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Lansing, Dem Bones.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Jeff Schultz, head cover. It's amazing to me, 20 years ago, how I still think about the names. And it wasn't a huge group of people, right? There wasn't 100, maybe 200 people, maybe at most.
There may have been, I never got the numbers. I probably should have asked. There were probably maybe 500-600 people on it.
Yeah.
But there were only like 20 or 30 that were really
active, doing anything
that I would get emails from every day. And so anyway, so I buy the head cover, and then I go on Scotty's website, and I saw that I could get my putter refinished. Well, perfect. It's rusting. So of course I need to get it refinished. So send it in. Do you want a certificate of authenticity? Is that a thing? So then I start looking at putters, and I see putters that are going for $500, $600, $700, $1,000. What is this all about? And so I check the box for a COA. I check the box for refinishing. $100 later, I get there. I think it was about $100 at the time for the refinishing.
It wasn't nearly what it is today, and certainly the turnaround time was way faster.
Yeah, it was only like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I get this yellow box at my house, and it's got a shiny remilled putter that had the right head cover on it, and now I'm off to the golf course to learn how to play. But I kept seeing all these emails come through. At that point I had set up a script so that it put them into a folder, and if you didn't look for a day, there would be like 200-300 emails, and you couldn't keep up with it. And so I had done a lot of web forums in the past. So growing up, I was always into tech. From the time I was 10 years old, got my first IBM PC Junior, and I was off to the races and had a modem that I had to plug my phone into. And it was, I could call the library, stuff like that, or use them at school. So I'd always been a tech guy, and I had built a web forum for, when I lived in Columbus, for a RC car racing club that I was in. So I knew my way around web forums. So I registered the domain CameronCollector.com, and I set it up, and then it was about 48 hours later, I was getting ready to send an email to this Yahoo group to say, hey, I just started this. It might be easier for some of you. And as I typed in Cameron Collector, I had spelled the collector wrong. I had spelled it COLLECTER instead of OR. And so I went out, I was like, oh crap, what if somebody else already has this? So I registered that domain, then reconnected it, and then finally did it. So for a while there, I owned both domains. One was spelled wrong.
I remember you, John Sharon, myself, and your dad had lunch. This is on Chagrin. This is about the same time frame. And I bring this up for an important thing because we were all on Real Cameron Fans at the time. And you had discussed this. You had said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to get into this. I hate the way this Real Cameron Fans is. What are your thoughts? Yeah. And I remember John and I were both like, we're on board. And I remember I was just thinking about this the other day, and I remember when I was leaving lunch, I was like, I wonder if this will ever really happen. This is the first time I think I met you.
I remember the lunch,
Yeah, and I remember the dialogue and the conversation. I remember you saying, this is going to be way different. And I said, okay. And most of us, John's much older. Sorry, John, but John's much older than us. And forums was kind of out there, but nothing for putters ever.
No.
Especially one brand specific.
Yeah. And that was the thing. And I just thought, what I've got at the time, I'm the CTO of a nuclear medical supply company. I've got racks of servers that aren't doing anything. So, it's nothing for me to throw another server on the rack. So I bought a server, threw it together, put it up there. I was member number 1. And then I had a couple of like test members that I made to check it out.
I think I was 9 or 11 or 12
You were in the first, Jeff Smith in Winnipeg was the first member. He was the first one that signed up for it. I still remember Smitty, and I still text with him. I haven't talked to John Sharon in years, but
I talk to him every once in a while. But
yeah. But anyway, so I set this up, and I put the groupings together of how it should be. And then this discussion started on Real Cameron Fans of like, this seems confusing. This seems whatever. Harumph, harumph, harumph.
I totally remember this.
Yeah, yes. Like everybody's like, who are you poaching? I'm like, look, I'm not selling ads here. Like, this is a service. If you want to use it, great. If you don't want to, that's fine.
And I want to interrupt you because a private conversation Doug and I just had was, guys, this is before social media, before YouTube.
Yeah.
So literally,
this is 2005.
To find this, you had to do a little bit of homework.
You had to do a lot of homework.
Yeah.
You had to know somebody that would invite you. Like that's how it was. And so I set it up, and then within 2 weeks, I think we had like 60 or 100 members, something like that. And I was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, let's all hang out together or whatever.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, it was 250 members. And then 3 weeks later, it was 500 members. And the forum started filling up with people talking about stuff. And that was when I was like, the Yahoo group like started less and less and less and less. And Bill Vogany was even like, I've got to stay and run this. I'm not going to, you won't find me there. And
there are 4 people here. I got to make sure I moderate them.
Bill was very polite and very pragmatic about it. He's like, look, I started this thing. This is my thing. You have your thing over there. So, we're not competing. It's all the same people.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was within 6 months, I think we had 1,000 members.
It was crazy.
And
the growth was crazy.
And it was all day. It was an all day thing. So yeah, I started it April 20th. Oh, what's the date here? I'll tell you the date. I have the head cover here. August 20th, 2004 was when this all was, not 05, because August 20th, 2005 was the first birthday party.
Yeah.
So this was 2004. Sorry. And
it's hard to believe.
It is.
It's almost 20 years.
It's almost 20 years ago. Yeah. And so I just kept doing it. But what ended up happening was I started to get like emails from like the OG collectors, like the people with, at that time, $100,000 collections. Like, hey, do you know if they made this? And do you know, like, here's a picture of something I have. Do you know? And they started asking me like my opinions on things. And I'm like, guys, I'm new to this. Like, I've been doing this 6 months. Like, I just put this thing together.
And you did bring in near the beginning moderators to help facilitate because it was, I don't say overwhelming for you, but it became a lot, way more than I think anyone anticipated.
Yeah, it was. And so the moderators I brought in probably 2 weeks into it, only because you would have people arguing. And my 2 rules on the site were no religion and no politics. And every once in a while, somebody would come in and blasting, I forget, Bush was president at the time. And I'm like, guys, not here. Same thing. Religion and politics will turn friends into enemies quicker than anything.
Shout out to you, John Rondolino.
Right. Yeah, John had to deal with a lot of that. But really, and then I did a podcast called The Cameron Collector. And my first episode was with John Rondolino. My second episode was with John Sharon. I think George Palombi was up maybe the third. And then I get an email from the studio, meaning Scotty's people, saying, hey, you're it was just really suspicious, like, hey, you may not want to do that. Like, not telling me that I was doing something wrong, but telling me I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's weird. Okay. But you but at the time, like if you were in the good graces of Scotty, that meant you got access to stuff that other people didn't. And so, okay, I'll toe the company line and, backed off of the podcast, and backed off of some other things that I wanted to do. And
do you think they were afraid of, in the podcast side, because the forums you can't control. It was all, I mean, literally, it started off as basically a couple things, then it turned into literally chapters on chapters of different subjects. And
right.
were they afraid of the insiders kind of spilling their guts, do you think? Or
no, I think it was the opposite. And so right early on, I met Nick Fenson, who was probably 20 years old at the time, and he had just started working for Art of Putters. So at the time, if you wanted a tour Cameron or any of the special stuff, you had to go through one of three people. There was Jim Butler,
Yep.
Dalton Dave,
Yep.
and then there was Rand Palace at Art of Putters. Those were the only three places that you could get that. Art of Putters was the newest of the three, and Rand hired Nick to help him run that, because Nick knew everything about every Cameron ever. Since he was like 16 years old, he'd been obsessing. So here's this, same thing with the real Cameron fans. Here's this 16, then 17, then 18, then 19-year-old guy.
Punk, who a lot of people thought he was.
To be sure, because, they were all, real Cameron fans, and here he was, and he knew everything about anything.
Yeah, I remember when having conversations with him early on, he really, I won't say outsmarted, but he knew more than everybody combined. I mean, he really was, and it's funny how this world works, but
well, he studied it.
Yeah,
like he turned that into, he's like, I'm going to do this. His degree is in putters.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. And so early on, Nick had reached out to me and said, hey, would you mind helping us with, like, we love what you did with the Cameron Collector. Can you build websites? And I'm like, I can. What are you looking for? And he's like, well, we need a website for the Art of Putters. And will you help us with that? And I said, sure. And so I flew out to California. I stayed in Rand's house for like a week. And Nick and I sat there and we built a backdrop and a little photo studio, and we photographed putter after putter after putter after putter. And back then there was this thing called the Levine Collection, which was the collection of putters that Bill Vogany had used to write the book, the Scotty Cameron story, or whatever it was called, The Art of Putters, Scotty Cameron story. And Rand owned them all. And so here I am with all of these like one of one or pristine versions of everything. And they wanted them all cataloged, and they wanted to put them on the website, and then all the tour stuff. And so I went out there and helped them build that. And then Nick and I got close. And so Nick would kind of give me a heads up when something cool was coming out, or, and he was very active on the forum. So everybody saw him front and center. Dalton Dave never once signed up for Cameron Collector.
Nope.
Jim Butler never had an account on a Cameron Collector. So that whole ecosystem was Art of Putters playground. So here's then, 1,500, 2,000 people that when they are looking for something, Nick's just making a list of the people that want what, and he had it all there. So that really, and then the feedback from that, Nick would take directly to Scotty, and then Scotty would do more stuff like this or more stuff like this based on the feedback that was happening from the Cameron Collector.
I remember when you came home from that trip. I think it was that specific trip. Maybe not. You had an 009 putter that had like a bronzy brown color with yellow paint fill. And I remember to this day, I still can picture this putter. I know it's no longer here, but I can still
got pictures of it. I'll send you. You can put it over what we're talking about right now.
But I remember seeing that and thought, man, this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
But I will say this, and I think a lot of people probably get the impression that, certainly back in the day, that Scotty was sending you stuff for free all the time. I don't think you ever got anything.
No, I got so Rand gave me that putter.
Okay.
As payment for doing the website. When my son Garrett was born.
I do remember that.
Yeah, when my son Garrett was born, he was my first son. I came home one day a few weeks later, and there was like the normal yellow box that we all got, like when you saw that on your door, that was exciting.
I remember seeing that too.
This box was only about this long, and I'm like, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
And so I opened it up, and it was a studio style with the GSS insert, and the insert was stamped Garrett Hardman, September 10th, 2006.
And the putter was the length?
It was the length of
Garrett, right?
Garrett, yeah, 18.5 inches.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I got this little tiny putter with a note from Scotty. And
I got goosebumps just thinking about that time, literally.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I got that. And then for the Cameron Collector's first birthday, the birthday party that I threw on our 1 year anniversary.
I remember that.
I got a hand-drawn head cover.
I do remember that.
Yeah, I got a hand-drawn head cover from Scotty that was really cool. But yeah, no, they didn't really I didn't get anything for that. Like,
it wasn't. I think a lot of people think it's, I think people hear the social influencers now. It really wasn't like it was back then.
Right.
And the boundaries were, I think, were obviously were a lot different. So, not that we want to spend 6 hours, but I want to move this along, but I think it's important. Relationship explodes. The Cameron Collector explodes.
Mm-hmm.
You've got members all over the world. Mm-hmm. You've got huge collectors. The biggest collectors on the planet are on this forum.
Yep.
It explodes. We have a birthday party where we saw a Tiger backup putter. Mm-hmm. We saw literally everything that we ever thought we could see.
Yeah.
One of the funny stories that I remember, I was playing with either John or George Palambi, and I remember, I think it was one of the doctors, I forget which one, but I remember his putter at the time was like a $7,000 or $8,000 putter.
Yeah.
And I happened to be playing with a Red X, and I think we were playing either it wasn't Sandridge, maybe it was Mayfield at the time. I remember that we had a caddy, and the caddy was clinking the putters together. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack with my $300 Red X putter.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So that goes on for how long? The Cameron Collector goes on for how long?
So Cameron Collector started August 20th, 2004, evidently, as I just relearned. And then in, or maybe it was 05, and because I remember Angie, my wife at the time, was pregnant with Garrett during the birthday party. So he was born in 06. So site was started in 05, birthday party was in 06. And then it was like probably December or January of 07 when I started Putter Talk.
And so let's back up a little bit here.
Yeah.
So I remember you and I had a conversation. You talked to a number of people, I remember this back in the day, about Putter Talk. And so Putter Talk was not, I'm getting rid of the Cameron Collector. It was in addition to, hey, there are a lot of great putter manufacturers, TP Mills, Bettinardi, all these other guys, right? And so I remember we had this conversation. You said, what do you think? And I said, oh, that'd be great, because there are a ton of other manufacturers that I think we'd all be interested in talking about or reviewing or what have you. Yeah. So,
well, that all stemmed from being at the PGA show in whatever year it was, and meeting. So I went there for the Table Rock booth, because that was always the big deal. That was the big day for Cameron collecting, was if you got into the PGA show and you were at the Table Rock booth when Jim Butler dragged out the trash cans full of putters, and he'd pull out $60, $80, $2,000 putters and sell them.
There was a line, I remember.
Yeah.
I mean,
when you got to the front of the line, you got to pick, and if you
were lucky if you got anything.
Yeah, you were lucky if you got anything.
Yeah.
But I met all these other putter manufacturers, and I remember being there and thinking, is there a collector base for these? And so I asked a few of them, and I was talking with David Mills, and he's like, yeah, people collect these for sure. And then I don't think Bettinardi was there, but there was another, Sizemore was another guy that I met there. And he's like, I don't have a big collector community, but there's nowhere for us to talk about that stuff. So that's when I registered Putter Talk and started that, not as a competing website, but okay, Cameron Collector is for Cameron, and Putter Talk can be for everybody else.
They should have. I say should have. They should have complimented each other.
They did for a while.
Correct.
Yeah, because I had sections for every putter manufacturer, and if you clicked on the Scotty Cameron section, it took you over to Cameron Collector. And then I had subsections for companies like Byron Morgan and for TP Mills, where if you clicked in theirs, it changed the look of the website so that you were in the same website, but it was their little part.
Right.
So so I did that for Bettinardi, I did that for TP Mills, and I did that for Byron Morgan to give them their own like high profile sections because they were the bigger.
Okay, I do remember that.
Yes. So they were the bigger of the the lesser knowns. But they all started really promoting that. And like that, Byron was the first one to jump on. He's like, I want to link to this for my website and send people here. I'm like, great, that's fine. So sends people there. And that got, I think that got over 1,000 members just in the first couple of weeks.
And so how long did both of them run before the proverbial shit hits the fan?
So I ran, it was interesting. I was going to be in California on business in Southern California. So at this point I, could email people at the studio, and I emailed Margaret at the studio and said, hey, I'm going to be in town. Can I have lunch with you? Like just Margaret.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I'd love that. Like, that'd be great. So great.
For those who don't know, Margaret was, I don't want to say the receptionist. She
was his
I would
right
say
hand.
ran everything.
She ran everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Margaret was the one that was really running the show.
Yeah. Margaret was the one back in the day where, and I'll give you an example. You and I went to Medina Country Club. You had Scotty's badge.
Yeah.
Send it in to. I called Margaret. Said, "Can you have Scotty do something with this?" She was his right hand person, I would say. At the time.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like I had a good relationship with the studio. Like we would go to, like, I had said, hey, I'm going to be at Medina. Can I meet Hank? Hank was their tour rep.
Yeah.
And they said, so I got an email back from Hank. He's like, no problem. I'll meet you there. Meet me at here. And so we were texting, and we got there, and he hands me a badge, and it was Scotty Cameron's badge. And he's like, now you can walk anywhere you want. So here I am, Doug Hardman wearing Scotty Cameron's badge around Medina, behind the ropes anywhere I wanted to go. Like it was stuff like that they did for me. It wasn't ever like sending me buckets of putters. It was more like, hey, I got a couple of free putters from Rand for working on the website and doing that stuff, but it wasn't ever like that.
But it was pennies on the dollar.
I don't even want to say that because
no, I don't mean. Yeah. But I mean, back in the day, no one really got paid for this.
Yeah.
Now today, you would make 7 digits probably for what bids, right? I mean, or close to.
Maybe that's debatable.
Yeah.
But anyway, so so right about this time, I had asked Margaret, like, do you want to grab lunch? She said, sure. And then I think it was the day before, me and Alberto were going. Alberto was coming with us because he knew where to go. He knew the area, so I flew out, met up with Alberto, and we drove down to meet Margaret, and it was going to be Margaret and Hank for lunch. And then Scotty's there too. And so great, I'd never met him in person. So, I went to shake his hand, and he lifted up, he was in a cast because he'd hurt his hand like hammering a putter or something. So we had lunch, and, he starts asking me questions about like the future of the website and what I have plans for. And I'm like, well, I think it's working great right now. We've got everything we need and more. I didn't need support. I wasn't asking for money. I was just doing my own thing. And then he asked me a question. He's like, what's this about Putter Talk? Like, what are your plans there? And I said, well, there's a bunch of other people, and we all want to talk, guys that collect Camerons also collect other stuff. And so I wanted a place for them to talk about it too. And now at this point, I hadn't monetized anything.
Correct.
I never ran an ad on any of these sites. I never asked for money from any manufacturer. Like This was a hobby. At the time, I was then CEO of a gift and loyalty card processor.
It was fun.
It was my hobby.
Yeah, it was fun.
So my real business is blowing up, literally. Like excuse me, we went from, I think, 4 employees to 40 in this amount of time. And I had Putter Talk going and Cameron Collector going. And so my days were at Sparkbase, my nights were at Putter Talk and Cameron Collector. And Scotty was like, you know, I just question where your loyalties are. I'm like, this isn't about loyalties. This is about like giving people a place to talk about stuff. Like, it's a hobby. And, you know, I don't know that Putter Talk existing took a dime away from any Cameron purchase ever during that time.
Yeah, I think his mentality, and it's I wouldn't say it's short-sighted, it's his opinion. Listen, Scotty does what he wants, but I think it was, you're either with us or against us. I think that was the mentality.
That was the mentality for, that's how it was, that's how I read it too. Yeah, that's how I read it too. But to his credit, when you're the king, you don't want somebody taking your throne. So I get that. Like, I don't fault anybody for any of that stuff. And so, then
go ahead.
No, and so it was about 2 weeks after that. I remember it was like really cold outside because I remember I was driving down Lee Road headed to the highway, and my BlackBerry shows an email from Margaret, and it was like, hey, we need to have a conversation about the website and what we're going to do with it. And I was like, what do you mean what we're going to do with it? Like, I own this. This is mine. You don't own this. This is me.
I remember this time tremendously.
Yeah. And so I had like an hour drive, and I get somewhere, and maybe I was going to the airport. I forget. I remember getting to a destination and checking in on Cameron Collector and seeing posts from moderators resigning publicly that they couldn't be associated with the website anymore. They couldn't be associated with the website anymore. You know, differences of opinions. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I got a DM from somebody, one of my moderators, and they were like, yeah, Scotty's literally calling all the mods on the phone and telling them that if they don't resign, they'll never get anything out of the studio ever again. And that all the distributors will have them blacklisted. So it was all these high-end collectors that were like so afraid of not getting anything new and cool ever again that they had to resign. And I remember sitting there thinking, what do I do about this? Like, this is so petty. And what's the point? Like,
I remember you and I had a conversation. I know you had multiple conversations within that time frame, and you were saying, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Do I sell it? Do I just shut it down? Do I give it away?
Right.
And this is, listen, I'm going on the record and say this. This is why you're a much better person than me, because I would have done one of two things. I would have sold it for the highest bidder, or two, I would have burned it down to the ground.
Yeah.
You decide to do what?
I gave it away.
He gives it away.
Yeah. I kind of called some bluffs. So what it was, I got on the phone with the remaining moderators I had were John Sharon, John Rondolino, George Palombi, and
Smitty, I think, right? Was he?
I don't think Smitty was a mod on that. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I forget. Yeah, I think it was the three of them. I think I remember the phone call. And the plan we came up with was call their bluff. Like, all these people that were the moderators and in charge just left publicly. I wonder what would happen if I gave the website away and see if they would come back. Because they would, like, all their reasons were that they didn't have time to be online anymore and couldn't be aligned with the Cameron Collector. You know, I was told that I would never get any new news or new anything. You know, meanwhile, they didn't know this, but like, I forget who it was. Burton, I think, was making their staff bags at the time. Burton was sending me the designs directly. Like, they were sending, like, I had all the Japanese released staff bags. Like, I had the artwork for them. Like, they had sent it to me like, here, check these out. We're making these right now. Like, I'd gotten to the point where Scotty's, like, manufacturers were sending me, you know, spy shots that I could post. So was so funny. So I'm posting stuff like that after all the moderators had publicly said that they wouldn't, get any new information. But it was just getting so petty, and I was like, you know what? I don't have time in this for my life. So I did a big long post and said, I'm sorry I offended the powers that be. That wasn't my intent. My intent was to give a voice to other people. Um, and so I'm giving the website to Bill Vogney.
Okay.
And that's how Bill found out that he was getting the website, was from my announcement. And he sent me a DM, and he's like, I about fell out of my chair, or something like that. He's like, why would you do this? I'm like, because the site needs to still exist. Like, there needs to be someone running this. And if the studio isn't going to trust me with it, they certainly trust you. And you obviously know lines that I don't, and you've got relationships that I don't. So I'll make sure that goes to good hands, and I'll just do putter talk.
Yeah.
And that's when I put a bunch of effort into putter talk. And my first call was